What's up guys, iJustSquad here. So today we are going to be talking about the smartphones of 2020. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Now of course when you're choosing a new smartphone you want to make sure that you know what you want. Because it's very easy to regret a purchase and you don't really want to do that with a smartphone. So this award show is here to highlight the best and the worst of phones this year. So let's go and get into it. So when I say good, bad, and ugly, there are multiple awards inside those three categories. So we have the good awards, which are right here. There's way too many for me to say out or type in Premiere, so I'm just going to show you a screenshot of my notes. So here's that. And then here are the bad awards, which are the worst design or the ugliest phone of the year, the most overpriced, the sales flop of the year, the biggest yawn factor, the most boring phone, and the worst battery penalty. And then the ugly awards are the biggest screw up and the biggest disappointment. And at the end of the video, I'll give you guys my top pick and my don't ever buy this award. So let's just go and get on with these awards. Alright, so let's go ahead and start out with the good awards with the best design award. Now, this is clearly a very subjective award. Everyone has a different opinion on design. Some people may like the old school stuff. Some people may like the older design of phones with bigger bezels, and other people like the bezel-less design of today's phones. Personally, at least in the past few years, I've tended to lean more towards the bezel-less displays, but there's a lot more to the design award than that. And with that in mind, my best design award this year is going to go to the iPhone 12 Pro and the iPhone 12 Pro Max. Now, this may seem like a bit of a surprise considering that last year I gave the iPhone 11 Pro the worst design award because of that camera square. But after a bit of time, I warmed up to it. But with the 12 Pro, the thing that makes the design even better are the side rails. I'm honestly just so glad they went back to the square design and the squared off sides. Not saying the rounded sides were bad, but these are so much better. And of course, being a flagship iPhone, you have all the high-end specs. You have the new A14 Bionic chip, 6 gigs of RAM, finally more RAM this year. Smaller batteries, unfortunately, but hopefully those won't be too bad. Now, next up is the Best Display Award. And for the past few years, I've given this award to Samsung because they have had amazing displays. And of course, they still do, but one brand has really surpassed them in the past almost 2 years. And with that said, the winner for my Best Display Award is the OnePlus 8 Pro. Now, the reason I give it to OnePlus this year is partially due to the display resolution and size. And if you want the numbers, it is a 6.78-inch 1440 by 3168 OLED display. But another reason I give it to OnePlus is because of the fluidity. The OnePlus 8 Pro has a 120 Hz refresh rate. Now I know that there are other phones with high res and high refresh rate displays. I mean, take the Galaxy S20 Ultra for example. That also has a 1440p OLED display and it is 120 Hz, but you can only run the 120 Hz in the 1080p mode, unlike the OnePlus 8 Pro. And next up is the most feature-rich phone, and it kind of depends on what you consider feature-rich. You could lean more towards the niche features like MagSafe in the new iPhones, for example, or you could lean more towards the bleeding edge tech. And with that in mind, my pick for the most feature-rich phone is the Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra. I seem to consistently choose Samsung for this award every year because Samsung really just tends to throw everything at us all at once. All the bleeding edge tech, but also all the niche tech with 100 times space zoom, the 40 megapixel cameras, the 120 Hz display, and the massive 6.9-inch display. It's one of the biggest displays I've ever seen in a phone. And of course, being a Samsung flagship, you have all the high-end specs. You have Snapdragon 865, 12 or 16 gigs of RAM in a phone. That's insane. 128, 256, or 512 gigs of storage, and a 5,000 milliamp hour battery. And next up is the Best Value Award. Now, looking back at last year's smartphone awards, I chose the Galaxy S10e, which I kind of regretted since we have seen some major strides from much more inexpensive phones from Google, from OnePlus, and even from some surprising companies like Apple. Now, I'm actually going to choose two winners for this award. The first one being the iPhone SE 2, or SE 2020, or SE second generation, or whatever the you want to call it. I do not care. Now, look at the on-paper specs and the old school design, and you may not think this is such a great value. And I get why you might think that. This phone only has a 720p LCD display and a sub 2000 mAh battery. But think about this. How often do you see an iPhone, a brand new iPhone with the almost flagship chipset? It's the A13 Bionic, which is last year's flagship chipset, but so that's why I call it the almost flagship chipset. But how often do you see that for $400? Not very often. And the second winner for this award is the Google Pixel 4a. Now, for the past few years, Google has not necessarily had the best camera hardware, but by far the best image processing. And the fact that they can put that incredible image processing into a $350 phone, that deserves some serious props. Next up is the biggest battery award. Now, I'm purely talking battery size and not real-world battery usage. There's always a possible chance that a phone with a 4,000 mAh battery could have better battery life than a phone with a 5,000 mAh battery if the software allows for that. But battery size is often what people will pay most attention to. And for that reason, the biggest battery award goes to the Asus ROG Phone 3. Now, if you guys saw my smartphones of 2019 video, you'll know that I named the Asus ROG Phone 2 the biggest battery winner as well. So Asus takes the cake again with the same size battery, and with that comes phenomenal battery life. Now next is the best camera. And of course, due to COVID and all the restrictions, I haven't really been able to do much testing this year. But looking at some photo samples from other reviewers with a bunch of different phones, there are two that really stood out to me, but one that definitely passed the other one. The winner for the best camera award goes to the iPhone 12 Pro Max. Now, the reason I'm not giving this award to all the iPhones is because the 12 Pro Max has a larger sensor and a much better image stabilization system, and that's something that none of the other iPhones have. Kind of unusual for Apple, at least in recent years, because all of the higher end iPhones and all the Pro iPhones have had the same image sensors. And the best video award is going to go to all the iPhones this year. So that goes for the iPhone 12 mini, the iPhone 12, the 12 Pro, and the 12 Pro Max. And this really shouldn't come as much of a surprise because iPhones have had the best video in any smartphone for a few years now. I'd say probably since the iPhone 7 back in 2016, mainly due to its 4K video capabilities. And next up is the biggest excitement award. Now this is purely opinionated, but there have been a lot of phones that I've been excited about this year. I was very excited about the new iPhones. I was quite excited about the new Samsung flagships, the new LG stuff, new OnePlus, and others. But the phone that I've been waiting for most this year is actually a phone that got announced back in October of last year, and we've been waiting for it for over a year now. The winner for the biggest excitement award is the Microsoft Surface Duo. The biggest reason I've been waiting for this phone is because of the design. I was about ready to give this the best design award until I saw the iPhone 12 Pro, but this is definitely the best design of any folding phone because, I mean, just look at it. It's so thin, and the outside of the phone is so clean because there's nothing there besides the Microsoft logo. Next up is the most innovative or the most out-of-the-box phone. And this is more of a form over function category. Now what I mean by that is that this award is based off of the craziest, most interesting, and most innovative designs of the year. And with that in mind, the most innovative design this year is the LG Wing. Now this may seem obvious to some tech enthusiasts because nobody besides LG would really do something like this. And this isn't the first time they've actually done something like this. If you guys remember back in, I think 2008, LG made the VX9400, which was a swiveling phone, and at the time that was a Verizon exclusive used in the original Iron Man movie. The Wing is pretty much 20 generations ahead of that. Not really, but I think you know what I mean. Besides the form factor, the Wing is nothing like that older version. The Wing has 2 touchscreens. The 9400 had a single button-controlled screen. Now, I really like the Wing. The only thing I don't like about it is that it doesn't have the Snapdragon 865. In a $1,000 phone, it has the Snapdragon 765G, which is fine, but more or less belongs in a $500 to $600 phone. Next up is the biggest improvement award, and my original plan was to give this to the Pixel 5 until I found out that it's not a flagship anymore. So Google again still managed to something major up. Not much of a surprise. So instead, I'm going to give this to the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 2. Now, they definitely didn't improve the name, and they definitely didn't improve the price, but pretty much everything else they made better. It has all the high-end specs, which the original Fold already had, so it didn't really need to improve on that. But if you want the numbers, Snapdragon 865 Plus, 12 gigs of RAM, 256 gigs of storage, and a 4,500 milliamp hour battery. Probably the biggest battery I've ever seen in any folding phone. And definitely the biggest physical difference with this phone are the screens. The cover screen goes from a pretty tiny 4.6 inch display to a pretty nice 6.2 inch display. And the inside screen goes from a 7.3 inch display to a 7.6 inch display with the removal of that big sort of side notch to just a mini hole punch camera. And finally, for the good awards, we have the biggest battery gain. And it's definitely not in any iPhones. Samsung could take the cake for this award, but it isn't. The winner is probably going to surprise a few of you guys because of how much I harped on them last year for their absolute garbage phone from last year. The winner for the biggest battery improvement is the Google Pixel 5. But for real, Google learned from a lot of their mistakes from last year with the Google garbage, Pixel 4, while creating some new ones, but they finally get rid of the absolute trash 2800 milliamp hour battery in the Pixel 4 to a pretty good 4000 milliamp hour battery in the Pixel 5. While not the biggest battery in any phone, it's still a pretty nice improvement. Alright, now time for the bad awards, starting with the worst or the ugliest design. And I gave this to the iPhone 11 Pro last year, and I warmed up to the design after a while, and that's why I'm not giving it to the iPhone 12 Pro this year. The winner, or I guess the loser for the worst design award this year, is the Huawei P40 Pro. Now, I'm not talking about the rear camera design. While that doesn't exactly look great, I'm mainly talking about that stupid hole punch camera. I mean, what even is that? Like, it basically looks like the Galaxy S10 Plus on steroids, and it looks awful. And I mean awful. Next up is the most overpriced, and this is measured by how much you get for the money. And there's a pretty easy loser for this one, and that phone is the Samsung Galaxy Note 20. Now, just to be clear, I am not talking about the Note 20 Ultra. The Note 20 Ultra is a very good phone. The Note 20 is a very not good phone. For starters, the back of every other $1,000 phone in existence is made of either glass or aluminum. The back of the Note 20 is made of cheap plastic. On a $1,000 phone, what the f***? It has a 1080p 60Hz display where you can easily get higher resolution and higher refresh rate display on less expensive phone. Take the OnePlus 8 Pro for example. You can probably get that for $100 cheaper than the Note 20 and probably even cheaper than that since that phone came out earlier in the year. Next up is the sales flop of the year. And this isn't exactly based on numbers, but the phone that is more for enthusiasts over the average consumer. And keeping that in mind, the sales flop of the year goes to the LG Wing. Now, this may not seem like the obvious choice, but let's be honest, most consumers aren't going to be into this design. And I understand why, because it's a very weird phone to get used to. Like, swiveling that open. Nah. Consumers aren't really going to be into that, I don't think. Next up is the biggest yawn factor, or the most boring phone this year. And this basically means the most incremental upgrade of the year, and this is going to go to the OnePlus 8. Besides the internals, there isn't really anything that's new with the OnePlus 8 over the OnePlus 7 or even the OnePlus 7T. Everything is going to feel very familiar if you're coming from a OnePlus 7 or 7T, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but hopefully the OnePlus 9 next year will have some pretty cool new stuff. And finally, for the bad awards, we have the worst battery penalty. And this is based on the biggest capacity drop, not based on real-world usage, again, like the biggest battery gain or, just the biggest battery capacity. And this year, this is going to go to the iPhone 12 Pro. Not the 12 Pro Max, just the regular 12 Pro. Now, going from a surprisingly incredible 3100 milliamp hour battery in the iPhone 11 Pro to a 2800 milliamp hour battery in the iPhone 12 Pro while adding 5G isn't exactly a recipe for great battery life. Now for the ugly awards, starting with the biggest screw up, and this is based on a phone that always seems to screw something up time and time again. And for 2020, that is going to go to the Motorola Razr 5G. Motorola just doesn't seem to listen to the complaints. They kept the battery the same size, an awful 2800 milliamp hour battery, in a 5G phone that was already terrible in the 4G version. And honestly, Motorola, why the hell is a mid-range chipset in a $1,500 phone when you can get much cheaper phones with the flagship chipset? It just doesn't make sense. And finally, we have the biggest disappointment. And I already went into detail on why this is the most overpriced phone. So for the second award tonight, the biggest disappointment goes to the Samsung Galaxy Note 20. Plastic back, 1080p 60 Hz for $1,000. No. And now it is time for my top pick or my favorite phone of the year and the Don't Ever Buy This award, which isn't necessarily the worst phone of this year. For my top pick, you guys can go ahead and call me a fanboy all you want for this, but I really like the design of this phone and it is a big improvement over last year. You guys can probably guess what it is just from that, but it is the iPhone 12. I really don't know what it is, but this is definitely my favorite iPhone. It almost kind of feels like the start to a return to form for iPhone, to be honest. And it is time for the most dreaded award, the Don't Ever Buy This award. And I'm going to be honest, this was a lot harder to choose this year. I was like, I could go with the Galaxy Note 20, but I was like, 3 bad awards? Nah. So instead, the Don't Ever Buy This award goes to the Sony Xperia 1 Mark II. Now, I'm going to be real. I don't think this is the worst phone this year. But this is not the phone that for anyone that lives here in the US. Because not only is it pretty difficult to buy a Sony smartphone in the US, but it's pretty hard to get support for them if you're ever going to need that. So there you guys go. Those are all these smartphone awards for 2020. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure you guys smash that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button down below, and follow me on Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And stay tuned because there are going to be a ton in this video that are bloopers. It's going to be at the blooper compilation at the end of this year, right after this video. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. That is going to wrap it up, and I will go and catch you guys in the next one. Peace.